Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Business from the Bass Boat on the Serious Angler Network, powered by X2 Power. And guys, today we've got a great show lined up. Really, what this show was all about was bringing on founders, um, owners in this industry, talking through where their business came from, the passion behind it, all that sort of thing. And that's really what this show is today. It's a traditional, not necessarily on the stat side like we've been doing, especially in the bass boat world. This is more traditional entrepreneur, seeing where it all came in, how it relates to the fishing industry, what exactly the story is behind the brand. Something that's just kind of my favorite shows are these type of shows. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Today we have the founder of, or I guess I should say the owner. We'll get into how everything happened with Xzone as well as the Rod Glove. So without further ado, let's bring in Jim Van Ryn. Jim, how are we?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Adam. How you doing?
Doing good. We were talking a little off air. We're on kind of opposite parts of the country right now, but it's getting hot. I always talk about the weather. It seems like in the beginning here, but you're on the northeastern part of our country.
Yeah.
Um, you've been out on the water at all or anything? I guess it's kind of the prime time for you guys, isn't it? Up there in June.
Yeah. So typically, what we do is because we're located just across the border in Ontario, Canada, our bass season doesn't open up until the third Saturday of June. So we are chomping at the bit for next Saturday. But then what we'll do is we'll put our boat in Lake Erie
Uh-huh.
in Canada, and then we'll run across the lake to the New York side. So we get our New York licenses, and New York has an early season where you can keep a couple. But so that's how we kind of get out there early, and then once that's over, then we primarily focus on Lake Erie, Canada side, or more of the northern natural lakes.
Gotcha. It's such
So
an interesting thing to me. Anytime you think of the Northeast and just certain attributes thereof of seasons, right? Like where it's like the majority of tournament bass anglers, I would argue the majority of bass anglers in general, there's just not all that much of keeping fish going on anyways, but we have these seasons still in Minnesota, in New York, or I guess not as much in New York, Pennsylvania, I believe, like a couple of these northern states, and then into Canada where it's like, hey, you aren't supposed to be targeting bass
yeah,
if you're out on the water. There might be another season that's open, but it's just such a strange dynamic to me because it's just not a thing in most parts of the U.S.
yeah, no, I know it's we uh, we we often look at those southern states and other states where it's just wide open all the time, and that makes for a nice 12-month season. Our season, especially in Canada, is really condensed. Right, you're talking last week in third Saturday in June to about December 1st, and that's it. So get
Right.
it all in, right? And so we fish hard during those 5 months. Uh, and then it's off to watching hockey for another 6 months.
Right. Right. No, totally. And so Andrew and Bailey, my two partners, the Serious Angler podcast, but Andrew's a guide also on Lake Erie there out of Buffalo. So
Oh,
he's hot and heavy right now. Gosh, it's been the last month from May, and then in this month of June, I think he has like 3 days off. So it's just go time. Makes a lot of sense
yeah,
being that way, and it's just crazy how it is like that, right? It's just that northern season is so condensed, but it's so good. The fishing is so incredible that it's
yeah,
almost worth it from that perspective.
yeah. You get Lake Erie in the spring, and it's good. You get Lake Erie in the fall, and it is phenomenal. Right, it is. You're bumping it up against that anywhere from 27 to 30 pound bags on a daily basis, and you don't just catch one 27-pound bag in a day. You may catch two or three, right?
It's easy, yeah.
So yeah, no, it's a pretty special place, along with a lot of other great places throughout North America. But it's our place.
Right, right. I've never been on Erie. I've been close. I fished the St. Lawrence River in Ontario, um, and then further up into or like on Champlain and those kinds of places. But Erie's been one that, especially with Andrew being right there, I really need to get out. Go check it out.
Yeah, no, that's it exactly, for sure.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Jim, you and I met at the Classic. I just was walking by the Xzone booth and was like, "Hey, just looking to kind of develop more of our podcast business from a um, guest standpoint of bringing people on," and said, "Hey, do you have any interest in coming on the show?" And we just both been busy and figured something to schedule out. But um, gosh, I guess let's get a little bit of background on yourself and how you got involved in the industry and how everything started with you with the Rod Glove and with Xzone.
Yeah. So we'll start with the rod glove because that's where it all started back in 2010. So the majority of my career I spent in a business where we did irrigation and automation.
Okay.
And so quite often we would use the rod glove material to run water lines in along with communication cable. I was going to turn that water line on and off. So we had a project, and the project went bad. Uh,
Okay.
so the guys de-installed it out of the greenhouse and they brought it back to our shop and they had to cut it all up. So I said, "Hey guys, just save me a couple of 6 foot pieces of this sleeving material. I want to put it over top of my fishing rods." Yeah,
Okay.
no problem. That's all. I took them and just took a little tie wrap and cinched up the end so the tip wouldn't poke through. Slid them on. Went off to my next club tournament, and
Okay.
guys started seeing them and they're like, "Hey, can you make me some of those?" Yeah, no problem. So you make them, and then we from there you go on to the greater the conglomeration of clubs to those tournaments. More and more guys start seeing them,
Right.
and everybody's asking for them. So, yeah, sure, why not? So I make them. Next thing you know, um, yeah, so you start thinking, right? Well, maybe I can make a business out of this. Still thinking I'm just going to sell, a few hundred a year.
Right.
Um, but so that's kind of where it all started back in 2010.
Now, at that time, were there any rod sleeve styles on the market? Was it kind of its own thing? What did the market look like from a rod glove perspective?
Yeah, so there was one other manufacturer in the market came in right around the same time in the U.S.
Okay.
And they we were the first ones though to come up with what we would call the tapered tip. So
Mm,
where we take the tip, we roll it over, we put a piece of shrink tubing on there, and we give it a nice pointy end.
sure.
That goes in and out of lockers. So that was our in and out of rod locker as well. So that was kind of our selling feature um, at the beginning. Um, since then, most companies have copied that design, and most companies have copied our colors, um, whether it be the U.S. or whether it be China, wherever. Right? We had some pretty cool colors, what we call our Spider series, and
Sure.
a lot of those have been copied, and that's fine. Right? I whatever
It's
we
hard to
still
avoid
we
copying in the fishing industry, it seems like.
well, that's for sure. I mean, it's you're always looking for uniqueness, but at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. Anybody can make it, and so you stand on your brand, right? You stand on your pros, and you stand on your morals and your ethics, and you treat people properly. And those are kind of standards for me in business. Treat people properly, give them good value, good product, and you'll always be in business. And yeah,
I, I love that. I think I heard this quote the other day that was like, the product ends up being a commodity at some point, right? Like everyone's got great products. You're really in the business of people. Like, at the end of the day, it comes down to your people and how you're treated because it all boils down to that. So
yeah,
I like it.
no, that's right. And we got with the Rod Glove, we got a big lift. So we started in 2010, and then 2011, I get an email from some guy who knew Gerald Swindle. I was like, "Hey, Gerald, saw your rod gloves. Would you mind to send him down a few?" No problem. Send him down to Gerald, and he goes, I love these things so much. I want to help you grow this brand. And I said, oh, I'm just kind of getting started. I can't really afford anything. He's like, Jim, I don't want your money. I want you to be successful. And one day when you make it big, don't forget about me. And
G-Man was saying this, or this was someone else that was friends with
no, no, this was G-Man.
you? Wow.
Uh, and I'll never forget that. I will always be thankful to him because, you know, what they guys normally get paid to do that kind of promotion, even back then in 2011. And he was willing to, you know, to trust us and, you know, promoted it for us for a while until we got to the point where we could afford to pay him. And, you know, just a super guy. Just,
Wow.
I mean, who does that, right? So,
That's someone of his stature even then. That is so cool to hear.
yeah.
And so it's 2011. Are you still working, doing your original gig full time with irrigation and that kind of a thing, or are you fully in the rod club at this point?
No, I am. I'm still doing my main career, which I did up until 2022. Almost a
Wow.
year ago is when I retired from that business.
Good for
Uh,
you.
but but I had really good employers, so I ran the company for them. And I said, guys, I have this other company, and they said, you know what? Work for us for 4 hours a day, build that company for 4 hours a day, and just do it together. So basically, for a 12 or 13-year period of time, I ran two businesses, and you know, so I was lucky, right? Most
Yeah,
employers would make you choose,
for sure. Yeah.
and they didn't. They were very gracious to me, and yeah, and we ended up selling that company. They did. I sold it for them, and
Okay.
then it was time for me to go. Right.
Got it. Got it. So that was 2022.
Yeah.
And so, sorry to get back into the rod glove. So you had this big hit, in 2011. So I'm trying to think. Social media probably really wasn't a thing at that point.
Yeah.
What kind of a hit did that do to or a hit, I should say, a positive lift to the brand with a G-Man situation? Was it just a immediate impact? I guess how do you quantify that, or not even to quantify it, but what kind of an impact do you feel like it had at that time frame?
Yeah. It was massive, right? The Gerald endorsing it for us, letting us put his face on our header cards, using him in some, you know, pretty low level marketing stuff. Back then, Facebook was just coming on,
Okay.
um, and it was just starting to be utilized by businesses to promote and build a brand. And but basically, Gerald legitimized the brand,
Wow.
right? And so we quickly grew to be the biggest rod sleeve supplier in North America, and I believe we still stand right there, right? Um, so then, yeah, from there you start getting retailers calling, and we're calling a lot of retailers, and then big box comes along and distributors, and so it just kind of rolls on each other.
Okay.
But really, really, that doesn't get going if Gerald Swindle doesn't come on board, right?
So
So
key point there.
absolutely.
And at this point, what's the manufacturing look like? Are you guys building this in a garage? Or are you just taking the stuff from, what did it look like, I guess, as things are rolling here? How are you building this product? How are you shipping it out? Just kind of some of the nuts and bolts there.
Yeah, so we, it all started on my dining room table. Then I built a little 20 by 8 foot section in my garage. And
Okay.
I thought, now I'm rolling, right? Like this, we're
Big time.
pounding out the rod gloves. Then it moved to the upstairs of the business that I was running. Then we're up to about 2,000 square feet. Then we had to move out of there into a 6,000 square foot place, and now we're in about a 15,000 square foot building that we operate out of.
Wow. Right there in Canada. You're in Ontario?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Awesome.
So
Great. So things are rolling. You're starting to get the big box store calls. You're also obviously prospecting on your own, finding tackle shops that are going to carry you guys. Um, And then when did, or we can keep going down the rod glove situation, or when did Xzone kind of get on your radar?
Yeah, so then Xzone, that would have been right at about 2016.
Okay.
So we didn't create the Xzone brand. Xzone was started by a guy up here in Canada, Mark Kulik, hands down one of the best smallmouth anglers that we've had up here. And he designed the first bait, which was the slammer, and
Okay.
then he designed the swammer. So um, he really started that in about 2007,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
and he I bought it from him in 2016. So it had been around for about 9 years, but it was a very regional company, right?
Sure.
So Michigan, upper Northeast US, and Southern Ontario, Canada, a little bit into Quebec.
Okay.
And don't forget, this one drop shot was just getting started, right? So it was one of
Oh,
the original drop shot baits. Back then it was like our slammer, the jackal crosstail shad, a couple others, right?
noble worm, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
So that's when it was all just getting going, and but also back when he ran it, it was a hand pour situation. So you're
Oh,
heating up the plastisol in a pot. You have a little silicone mold, and you're just pouring it into this open mold, letting it sit, demolding it, and doing it all over again. So I owned it when we bought it. I owned it for about a month, and I thought I can't scale this business, right? Like
right.
hand pouring is a craft.
Yeah.
Uh, I can't hire enough people who are good enough at it to make this work. So that's when we bought our first injection machine, and we started making our own.
Oh, okay.
And then, yeah, the basically we hand poured certain baits, and machine injected certain baits
Okay.
for probably 2 or 3 years until we finally got rid of hand pour, and we found a way to come up with our formula that we could have machine consistency on the product, but still the softness of a hand pour.
Oh, okay.
That took a long, long time to get that just right. Uh,
Right.
Machine injecting baits that are lifelike, and anybody in the bait industry can tell you it's not as simple as just putting together a recipe of soft plastic. Um, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, right?
Sure.
Really getting it right.
Yeah.
So at this time, 2017, my son was just graduating from high school, and when he was 10 years old, he did a report or a project in school saying, "What do you want to be when you grow older?" So at 10 years old, he writes this report: "I want to own a soft plastic bait company."
No way.
Yeah. So 7 years later, he's now 17, graduating from school, and I said, "What do you think?" He goes, "Dad, it's still what I want to do." And so he came into the business at that point, and he basically runs Xzone. So he's responsible for all the production, the 300 plus recipes that we have, getting the colors just right. I don't even have to think about that, right? He's that guy.
Wow. How cool is that to have your son involved like that, and
Yeah,
for him to get to realize his dream through that?
yeah. No, it's been great. And then not to skip too far ahead in the story, but while we're talking about sons, then back in 2020, my other son, um, who was working for me in the other business that I was running,
Uh-huh.
um, he came and joined the company. Now, my sons, I won't say they're polar opposites, but they have very different skill sets.
Okay.
So my younger son, who came in 2020, he's more like me, just loves numbers, spreadsheets, business, figuring it out how to go. My
Yeah.
other son, who runs Xzone, is I'm not going to say artistic, but I'm going to say a guy who just loves all that subtlety. He's got lots of patience. He can work through it. Um, you
The
know,
creative process.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So now I have both my sons involved in the business with very complementary skill sets, right? One doesn't have what the other has, and the other doesn't have what the other has, and it's really, really nice.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, they let the old guy chip in with some conversation, and you know, uh,
Oh,
but yeah, no, it's a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. And something that I think would be, or just a question for myself, selfishly, just as I kind of look into the fishing industry and look at kind of some of these opportunities, and then just I think it'd be good for folks to understand how it works. So obviously the Rod Glove is your from the ground up startup, right? In this situation,
Yeah.
Xzone, it's there. You saw, I would presume, an opportunity to say, hey, look, here's a regional brand. Can we take this and make it a national brand? Obviously, a year into it, you said, maybe there's not because of the way these are poured.
Yeah.
But, when going into buying a business like that, how does that work? Is it a multiple of EBITDA? Like, how are you deciding the purchase price? And obviously, you don't have to share any of that, but just am curious how people go through that. And then B, what opportunities did you see where you felt like, hey, I can take this potentially and make it bigger?
Yeah. So I kind of have this mind that when it comes to business, I sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but I typically tend to see everything big.
Right.
So I see the end goal,
Okay.
and I don't stumble on all this little stuff that's going to get in the way for me to get to my end goal. I just know that that has to be done. Let's make it happen.
Mm.
So oddly enough, when I bought Exxon Lures, um, it wasn't a very complicated process in terms of how to value the company.
Yeah.
The company that I sold last year, we went through 6 months of due diligence. It was lawyers, accountants, um, value creation teams, all kinds of different things that went in, like just 6 months of hard work.
And
Uh,
that's coming, I'm sorry, so that to cut you off, but that's coming from the seller's point of view. You guys are getting it ready to sell, or is the buyer bringing all those people in to analyze the business?
yeah, this was the buyer driving all of
Okay.
that.
Okay.
But when I bought Exxon, I didn't have to go through any of that. It was a really short conversation. It was
Right.
like, Mark, I want to buy your business. You want to just fish and do more stuff like that with your family. What do you want for it? Just throw it in an email
You
format.
you approached him. This wasn't a, hey, I'm thinking about selling this. I'm not. You were like, this is something where I see an opportunity. I'm gonna go see if he's willing to sell.
That's right. Yeah.
Good for you. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And in conversation, I understood his frustrations and so forth. Like, wasn't out of the blue, so to speak, but we
Right.
had been talking. And
Sure.
I said, hey, Mark, why don't you let me just buy it? And then
Yeah.
we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
And he was gracious enough to sell it to me. And then away we go.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And then it's okay. How do we take this from point A to, and okay, when you say your end goal, you're the big dreamer mind version of this. When you saw X Zone, where did you see the end goal of it when you're saying, hey, this is where I want to take it?
Yeah. For me, the end goal is to be one of the top five soft plastic brands
Wow.
in basically North America. I mean, we sell all throughout the world,
Yeah.
a lot into Europe, South Africa, Australia, and so forth. But really, in America, that's what I want to be.
Got it. Got it. That's fantastic. Now, this is just a question from, and it's two different complete. I mean, it's same industry, so you have some parallels there. That's nice, right, with the Rod Glove and the X Zone, but it's soft plastics versus kind of more of a durable-ish good compared to soft plastics going all the time. But anyways, going from the startup phase of the Rod Glove and then X Zone being a business, a brand that you bought, albeit in its early stages, but would you do one of those two things again? I guess was the startup a lot of was that a lot tougher road than a business that was already built, or is it not even the same consideration between the two, or is it I would do both?
Yeah. Well, I think so both brands or product categories have very different dynamics,
Sure.
especially when I was starting. Right. So if you think about the rod glove, it was a market that was ready for rod protection. It was a market that didn't have a lot of competitors in it, and yes, you worked hard, but it was relatively easy, right?
Okay.
In
Right.
terms of that.
Because it's the new thing, right? It's the new
Yeah,
product.
exactly. And fast forward six years to Xzone,
Yeah.
and suddenly you're buying a brand that is somewhat established, had a lot of Canadian retailers. So that was nice for cash flow, right? You're selling product, you're getting going, you have something to build off of. Um, but now you find yourself swimming in a in a pond with literally 100 soft plastic manufacturers, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
Super saturated at that point and extremely saturated. I mean, it just seems like there's plastic companies rocking and rolling everywhere.
yeah, yeah, and that's it. So there's two very real differences, right? So um, the potential of Xzone is big, but it's harder. Customer acquisition costs in the Xzone product line are probably 5 to 6 times that of customer acquisition cost in the rod glove.
Okay. And so can you go through that for us? I guess what is customer acquisition cost?
Yeah, so customer acquisition costs are everything that you are doing. So how are you advertising on Google? What kind of time are you putting into Instagram? What are you working with in terms of website sponsorship? Working with Bassmasters. Who are you sponsoring? All of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Everything you're doing to get the customer to buy your product, basically brand building, right?
Right.
But because in rod glove you're only building up against a few other brands, right? There's a lot of them, but there's really still only two or three of us that kind of have most of the
The
market.
main players. Okay.
Yeah, and those, we were all the ones who got in early, and so it's interesting, right? There's a reason why the Senko from Yamamoto is $2 more than everybody else's, and they still sell more than everybody else.
Right.
Like, that early entry into a segment of the market, is critical, right? For everybody else, it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Um, Not unconquerable, but uphill.
Sure.
Um, and so that's kind of been our experience with the rod glove and Xzone. Is just, it's different, right?
Sure.
The one thing that the rod glove did teach us with getting Gerald Swindle was that in Xzone, I knew I needed to get a really good pro to legitimize the brand. And so then 2019, that's when Brandon Pollock and I started talking.
Got it.
So,
Got it. And so that was that mindset of saying, hey, having I'm going to call them A+ class pros, where it's that top level guy. I would say there's 20 or less of these probably folks that are movers, right? Like they move product because they're of everything they do. But Brandon's one of those that's hard to beat in any aspect when it comes to things. But that's great foresight, I guess, to see, hey, we saw the advantage of this way back, or back in 2011. Let's strike a deal in 2019 with the guy, especially while the iron's hot with Brandon Pollock.
yeah, no, that's it exactly. And really, at the time that we signed Brandon Pollock, from a pure business um, practice perspective,
Mhm.
I had no business signing him, right? When you start to think about how much money, what percentage of my revenue am I going to put into advertising or pro staff, right? There's some general rules of thumb there that we use in business, and really, I had no reason to sign him, right? It would, if it didn't work, it would have been foolish. But again, you got to keep your eye on that prize, right? All of that other stuff is just distraction. It's when you know where you want to go, you're willing to do the things that will get you there, and that's why we signed Brandon.
Yeah, so there was a risk there, right? Like you're putting up a lot of capital for where the brand was at that time to
Yeah,
acquire someone of this level.
yep,
Wow. Wow. That's awesome to hear. That's something that I think doesn't get talked about enough, of saying this is more of a gut situation, and you had the experience from seeing it previously. But like, if you were looking at if there was a CFO at your company, is probably like, hey, this probably doesn't make sense, right? Like we're going to spend a lot of money on a guy like this, but you're like, just listen up, just watch what happens. Like we're going to give it a shot here, and it could have failed, but it worked out.
Yeah. And so, a lot of people said that at the beginning. Oh, why? How can you afford that? And then on the other side, a lot of people asked Brandon, why would you sign with, a small company like Xzone?
Sure.
And so he took a chance on us too, right? Uh,
Right.
because that's his brand. But we just, Brandon and I see eye to eye on so many things, and and I'm not talking about baits. I'm talking about morals, ethics, honesty, integrity. Those are the things that you can build off of, right?
Right.
You can teach everything else. You can get through everything else. But those are core fundamentals of a person that you're looking for when you want to do business together. So,
Yeah, that character aspect I think is huge, right? I mean, you can see it in someone like Brandon and everything that he does, and if you align with that type of a person, like there's no better fit. Makes a
yeah,
lot of sense to me.
yeah, yeah. It's to the point almost where for both of us, uh, money is kind of secondary, right? Yeah, do you need money? Absolutely. Money is what makes the world go around. But um, quality product, good customer service, good ethics, those are what really take the front seat in driving this business forward.
Wow. Yeah. That's great. That's great to hear, and how things are run that way. Um, so was it a similar situation with Brandon where at this point, right, you're throwing up the dollars. Here we go. Let's see what happens. Was there an immediate hit or an immediate step up similar to what you had experienced with the Rod Glove, or was it a different situation?
Wow, here's kind of the crazy part about that. So it's January 1st, 2020.
Okay.
Brandon Pollock now signs with Xzone Lures. That's his very first day of working with us. Late March, COVID comes around. You got about 5 or 6 weeks of everybody not really knowing what to do, and then the the fishing industry absolutely explodes because everybody is they can go fishing, they can't go out for dinner, and they can't travel. So
Right.
suddenly the market grows by, let's say, 30% more anglers.
Yeah.
Demand for product goes through the roof. This Santee Cooper event comes along from Bassmasters, and Pollock wins
Yep.
on our baits.
On by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, so that just shoots the brand forward.
Wow.
Uh, then a few months later, he's up on Champlain, and he wins again on
Mhm.
our slammer. And then things just went insane for about a month and a half. Um, and then ever since then, it's been just perpetual momentum, right?
Wow. The snowball effect's happening again.
Yeah, it was almost kind of like the perfect storm, right?
Yeah.
So you got the right bait, you got the right pro, you got the right economic drivers based on what was happening with COVID, and all of these things come together. And you say a prayer of thanks because this shouldn't happen, but it did, and
Yeah.
not complaining.
Yeah. No doubt about it. And gosh, and you've seen the thing I think about with these again, the Brandon Polonics, the Jacob Wheelers, like these top tier pros where sponsor dollars are always going to get competitive for. Um, when it's guys like that, we've just seen huge conglomerates in the fishing industry, right? Where we have brands that do soft plastics, hard baits. They have their own terminal. They have everything now under one umbrella. So it kind of it puts pros, in my opinion, in somewhat of a tough spot because they have to be all this way. They can't have maybe a smaller hard baits brand or something because it seems to me there's less segmentation, right? Or there's very few guys that can say, hey, I want this rod company and I want this reel company. Most of the time it's like, hey, you get both. It's your,
Yeah.
that's how we roll. Um, I'm curious from your perspective, has that been a struggle for guys like Brandon? Do you see that being to just continue to be an issue? I guess, what are your thoughts around some of that?
Yeah. So yes, it does come up. So, for the first years that Brandon was with us, he was always with Rapala.
Right.
So then at the beginning of this year, him and Rapala respectfully parted ways, and he's joined up with Megabass.
Right.
So
One second, Jim. That just shows so much character too with Brandon from that. Like that was such a cool way to leave that brand and be on such a positive note. And it wasn't, I just love that kind of a situation. Shows the character. And oh no, that guy's he's awesome. I fished a tournament on Coeur d'Alene this last year, and he and Tiffany and his baby, they all came to the weigh-in. They didn't need to do that, right? I mean, like he was just in town and was like, I'm gonna go see some of the local guys again, and we were up there because it was a championship, so some of all the western states were there, and it was like, man, this guy's here just watching the weigh-in like a normal guy.
yeah,
It was awesome.
yeah, no, that's very cool.
But sorry, didn't mean
But
to cut you off there.
no, not at all. But then you start to look, okay, um, where's Xzone going? Can we always make it on soft plastics? Do we need to branch out into wire baits, spinner
Right.
bait, jigs, all of that kind of stuff? Now you have a collision with Megabass, right? Because they have spinner baits, they have. I'm not sure that they have jigs or not, but anyways, there's some collision there, but they also have soft plastics,
Right. Right.
and so you have really it's about working through it together, right? So they respect us and we respect them.
Good.
So I'm not going to I'm not going to give Brandon an ultimatum,
Right.
and Megabass is not going to give Brandon an ultimatum. Let's work it out. Like
Yeah.
let's figure it out. Um, and so that's just kind of the way that it works. And you're right; it doesn't work that way for everybody, right? Some of the big ones, you know, you're all in. You're fishing our rods, reels, baits, terminal tackle, tungsten, everything. We got you. And I get it. That's fine. They can do it the way that they want, but
Right.
that's not the case.
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I see both sides of it, right? Like I see the power behind some of those brands of saying, "Hey, we have all the chips." And from the pros perspective, it's like, "Hey, I have everything covered." And there's probably a sizable check because of that. I don't have to have as many people to report to, but at the same time, like in times like now, as things are starting to get more normalized economically, things are starting to get harder. Like as sponsorship dollars decrease, as the marketing dollars decrease, like the concern that I have for that is like you're putting yourself in a box with one person. It's not like, hey, this one I may lose a little bit on this brand here. It's like I might lose it all if they cut me, right? If that's your only paycheck or if that's your main paycheck, like it could be a really big hit compared to if you have a little bit of diversification.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And those who are higher up the ladder, so to speak, as far as pros go, the more they can dictate their own terms, right? The safer they are, to a certain extent,
Right.
unless they're getting paid way too much.
Right.
Um, but the safer they are, and it's so really, I think you have to look down to that next tier of guys, right? Those guys who are making just enough sponsorship dollars to put some fuel in the truck, pay for the tournament fees, and that kind of stuff. Those are the guys that I would have the most concern for,
Right.
because every sponsorship dollar to them means a lot, right?
Means yeah, it's their everything.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Where you know uh, some of the bigger names, they may live a little bit, not living in excess, but they have excess, right? They have
For sure.
some room to play there.
No doubt. And they're just, I mean, they're more well established just from everything else standpoint too, right? Just because they've been doing it for a long time, they've had a lot of success with a lot of brands over the years. They have that ability to take some lumps if they come, and they're less likely to take it because they're the guys who are moving the most product too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of times they're the guys who are the most well-rounded as well, uh, in terms of um, what they're doing for their own brand and what they're creating content-wise. So if you look at a guy like Brandon Pollock, one of the biggest logos on his boat is right midway, and it's BMP Fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Because Brandon understood a long time ago, A, I need to make top quality content. B, I need to build my own brand. So whether I'm fishing Bassmasters, MLF, or wherever, I'm not tied to them. I am my own brand, and he got that really early on, and has made the investments to do it. Right, like how many guys have their own videographer with them all the time, right? Um, and not that Kyle is with them 24/7, but
Sure seems
every,
like
yeah,
it.
every videoable moment, Kyle's there, right?
Yeah.
And now our other pro, Carl Jochimson, he has now done the same. He's got a full time videographer this year who's just capturing everything. And so again, it's forward thinking, right? It's getting ahead of that curve. Before you have to do it, you should do it.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly, I mean, that's the lesson here that I keep hearing is what you just said, but it's making that putting your um your your effort, your business out there in that risk situation. Again, taking all into account, but you're taking a risk here by laying that capital out in that investment. But you did it with Brandon, but it's the same way that anglers maybe need to look at things and say, hey, I had a really good year. That's great. Instead of putting this extra capital that I have, like let's look at building this out to where I'm going to include this into my content. I'm gonna take some of this extra money, or I need to be pushing more of my stuff on this content side because it's an investment and it's not going to pay for itself right now, right? Like you're gonna be losing money by doing some of that stuff, just the way tournament fishing is from a money making standpoint. But long term, if you can see it over the horizon, it could be super beneficial for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. These guys are they're entrepreneurs, right? Every fisherman is his own business, his own brand. They're entrepreneurs. They have to take risks, just like you and I. And everything that we do, they have to take risks. They have to hope for healthy return on investment. And yeah, and some guys are good at it and get it, and some guys um, don't. And but that's through all walks of life, right?
Right. Right. No, that's exactly it. That's no, I think this has been a great lesson perspectives for folks listening. Um, as far as things go currently for Xzone, so you've got things rolling with Brandon, and here we are now today. It's 2023. Fishing industry has had such a incredible last couple of years. Everyone has talked about it, from boat brands to bait companies to everything has just been like, holy cow, this is incredible. A lot of money coming in to the industry itself. We're in June here of 2023. Where is your um, handle on the fishing industry right now for folks? I guess some insight in your perspective. Where are we at? What's going on in the worlds that you're in, and the circles you're in?
Yeah. So I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a slow clearing up of the backlog of product. So kind of the business dynamics as to what happened is you had demand that far exceeded supply. You had broken supply chains, supply channels that made you order 6 months to a year out, right? So that stuff is on order and it's coming. Now all of a sudden the industry slows, less guys, but guess what? That product's still coming. So
Yeah.
so suddenly you have supply way over exceeding demand, and that's going to take a couple of years to get through, right? But we're getting there. We're getting through it, and so we're starting to. Like I thought this year would be a lot worse than it is,
Okay.
but we've had a solid year, and but it's still going to take a while, right? You're going to see a lot of product dumped in the markets. You're going to see a lot of stuff happening you already have, and that's okay. Just stay the course. Just just keep going forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're saying a lot of stuff being dumped into the market just at a discount because someone had way too much supply and they're not able to move it, and so they're either getting acquired or having to get rid of that stuff at a discount.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're not only talking about just the manufacturers, but you're also talking about the retailers, right? The retailers had a lot of, they were all real thick on inventory,
Right.
because they were also, let's say you ordered from a certain manufacturer 4 or 5 times during COVID, and every time it got back ordered. Now suddenly you have 4 or 5 times coming to your door, right? And now good manufacturers let them off the hook on it, but not everybody did, right? Everybody, no, no,
So
you ordered these, they're on back order. I know it's 200 more reels than you need, but hey, contract's a contract.
yeah.
So, uh,
Yeah.
so a lot of those guys are just were choking on product. A lot of
Yeah.
guys got innovative and moved it in, you know, creative ways.
Got it.
Um, it just goes back to the old thing, right? When supply is high, prices are going to drop. People are going to panic. Stuff's going to get blown out, right? And you just get through it, right? This isn't unique to us. This is historically the way things go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes a ton of sense. And yeah, it's just I've heard similar situations from tackle shops, from boat dealers. It just seems like that was a time frame there where it was oversupply. And then is it most of the time, and this is just my lack of knowledge here, are you paying for that order even though it's, I mean, I would assume you're not, I guess, paying for it until that order is placed and it's coming to you. If you order 4 or 5 times, like you're saying, are they then getting those, are they paying for that in advance, or are they also down from the having to pay for that product now that's coming that they may not be able to sell?
Yeah. You talking from a retailer's perspective, or are you
From
talking from a,
from a retailer's perspective, if you're just a tackle shop and you're ordering and you've ordered too much.
yeah. Um, and I really don't know. You know, typically terms aren't, yes, sometimes they may extend terms. The manufacturer may extend terms to the retailer to help them out, but
Yeah,
I would imagine that's really on a case by case basis, right?
got it.
As a manufacturer, you're in a kind of a tough spot. We didn't have this at all, so,
Yeah,
um, but some manufacturers, you're in a tough spot, right? So now that guy's got your product. You can either squash them and never get your money,
right.
or you can work with them and let them pay it out over 6 months or whatever. Right?
Sure, sure.
So yeah, it's you got to be careful how you do it.
Right. Yeah, you got to look at the long term effect of that. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Great.
Uh,
Well, go ahead.
we've been a little luckier on our end as far as that whole dynamic goes, because we manufacture most of our stuff in house, right? So everything that is Xzone definitely gets manufactured here. But then we have a tungsten line, right?
Right.
Nobody can nobody can manufacture tungsten in North America.
Yeah. Why
It's
is that, by the way?
it's energy.
Okay.
So tungsten is the hardest material on Earth, and it takes the highest temperatures of all materials to melt it and to form it.
Right.
So about 6,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, so it's not that there's a short supply of tungsten in the world, because you can get it. It's what does the energy cost to do it? To,
To
to,
get
to
it that hot.
Right. So you take countries like China, Vietnam, wherever, who, for the most part, don't really care about the environment. So
True.
they'll heat up those ovens for as hot as they want for as cheap as they can, and it's and that's why we import it. There is actually one company in the U.S. now who is starting to make their own tungsten.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, I can't remember which one it is, but I'm thrilled to see it. Right. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. That's good to see locally, um, nearby anyway. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, we're getting into here. We're about a month out from Icast. Do you guys have anything fun planned or anything you can kind of go into a little bit right now that Xzone has on the pipeline coming up?
Yeah. So first of all, at Icast itself, we will not attend with a booth.
Sure.
Never have,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to say never will.
Yeah.
But we've always chose to take that 25 or $30,000 that you would spend on Icast and do something different with it, right?
Sure.
I don't. Uh, Anytime that there's a conventional way to do something, you do yourself a favor when you think about unconventional options that may give you a better return on investment.
Hmm.
I'm not saying you have to do it,
I
but
like
at
that.
least do yourself the favor to look at it that way.
Yeah.
And so ICAST has been one of those things where we've just said, I can take that $25,000, $30,000 and I can plug it into Google, I can plug it into Bassmaster, I can plug it in here, and so forth.
Sure.
Now, having said that, we have also always kind of timed our product launches with either ICAST or with the Bassmaster Classic, so you
Right.
can kind of everybody's looking to it, right? It's those 2 times a year everybody's saying, "Oh, what's everybody coming out with?" So we've timed it that way.
Sure.
Um, we had hoped to come out with one bait, 2 different sizes. This ICAST, I just don't think it's going to happen, right?
Got it.
The still getting things manufactured is difficult.
Mm.
In our particular case, it's the molds, our production molds to make these things. I might be surprised, but at this point, I'm not counting on it.
Got it. Got
So,
it. So it'll be more of a Bassmaster Classic timeframe release potentially next spring
yeah,
if it doesn't work out.
that's right.
Got it.
But as far as where that's going generally for us as a company, um, we we want to be. We're still going to always release 2 to 3 baits a year, but we want them to be special, right? We have enough baits in our lineup that take for instance our adrenaline bug. So adrenaline bug is it's a beaver bait, right? And much like we talked about earlier with the Senko, it's tough to beat Reaction Innovations at their beaver game.
They were the first. Right. Right.
And we just don't find that those kind of run of the mill baits do well for us. People were starting to gain our identity as finesse fishing. It's always been our identity, but um, and just keeping things unique, right?
Sure.
And we have to, right? I mean, take a look at some big companies. Let's take Z-Man for instance.
Mhm.
I have a world of respect for these guys,
Yeah.
and they do have unique baits. Um, but that brand is so strong. You could put tape measures in a bag and call it a lure, and Z-Man would sell it, right? And good for them, right? Like
Yeah.
that's great. I love their success.
Yeah.
I congratulate them on it. We don't have that luxury, right? We have to come to market being as
Something new.
yeah. So then when you take our stealth invader, which let's see, we can see this thing. That was kind of that was
There you go.
done at can't really see it, but
It's like a swim bait almost with the boot tail upside
yeah,
down.
yeah. So it has an inverted tail on it. It's got some fins. It has a real wide kind of goby stance to it. Um, that is something that we're looking forward to developing, and that really falls right into what our pros like to do as well.
Yeah.
um, and Brandon is relentless on detail, not necessarily a detailed bait, but getting that bait just perfect. And so that fits well with my one son, who loves the creative detail on the things. Me, I'm like, holy crap, when are we going to get this bait to market? I got to start turning dollars. But
Right.
I'm so thankful I have the influence of those 2 guys in my business, right? And that's proof that you need a team to build everything. But yeah, that's kind of where we see ourselves going, right? And if that means we don't come out with as many baits as maybe we would like to, we want every bait to be special.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And just like you said, figuring out where you are in the marketplace and pushing and exploiting that strategy with that. So
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense to me. Um, as we see with soft plastics over the last, gosh, 3 years, especially in the smallmouth world, we're seeing scent be a really big player in the marketplace, right? It seems like there's that push there. Is there anything from Xzone around that? What are your thoughts on scent?
Yeah. So we do put scent in all of our baits, and it's what we call our X formula. Um, uh, we don't have a lot of the the independent research and studies and all of that kind of stuff that goes with it. We've never put a big emphasis on it. I like our scent; it's good,
Yeah,
but we haven't marketed it real well. Um, like I'm an angler who I'll buy an unscented bait because I have a specific scent I want on it.
right.
Every situation, I might have the same bait fish in five different places, but you want to have something on it that fits what you're doing.
Mhm.
And maybe that's a downfall of mine. I'm not sure, but so yeah, we've never really focused on it a whole lot.
Sure,
So,
sure.
but yeah, you can see it, right? The trick is that you have to make scent a that works, but b that doesn't destroy the action of the bait. And unfortunately, that's too common
Yeah,
now, right? Yeah, you can smell it. It smells awesome. The trigger strikes, but if it starts to harden that bait, even just a little bit, you better either adjust your manufacturing processes to accommodate that hardening, or it's just not going to be good for your bait. So there's a lot to it, like everything else.
right, right. Big time stuff behind that because, like always, right? How many of us have said, "Oh, scent matters, this and that," and then you go and catch them, you know, just lights out without any scent. And then there's time, so I see like that's more on that action side of things. And then, having some, I like you said, I believe in it, but to what extent, I don't know personally. But yeah, it seems like there's just so much that goes into that.
Yeah, yeah, there really is. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. Well, Jim, how I like to end every show is basically your number one biggest piece of advice for anybody in the fishing industry or looking to get into the industry. Let's say, especially in your case, someone who's maybe looking to start a business or acquire a business in the fishing industry. Let's start with that question.
yeah. Uh, so looking to get started or looking to buy, either way, be passionate, be bold, and work hard, right? Because this industry, like many others, there is no free ride. There's no easy path to success. Um, you just have to be willing to sacrifice to get anywhere in this life, but particularly in business, right? So be willing to pay the price. Count the cost before you start, right? Am I
Mhm.
willing to pay that price? Am I willing to make those sacrifices?
Right. And it's not just financially, it's all the sacrifices that go into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. And then as far as your biggest, let's go biggest largemouth, smallmouth bass, spotted bass that you've caught and where you were and what you caught them on.
Yeah. So I would guess that my biggest largemouth was probably in Florida, and it was actually not that big. I think it was 6.5 pounds or something.
Okay.
I really can't remember what I caught it on because it was 20 years ago. It could have been just on a shiner under a bobber or something. I don't
Now
know.
we're talking. Yes.
Yeah. But and then my largest smallmouth was bigger actually. He was 7.2.
That's a
Uh,
giant smallmouth.
yeah, and that was I want to say it was on a tube.
Okay.
So that was again a long time ago, before we had Xzone.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm sure he would have came on an Xzone bait.
Well,
But no, I probably caught him on a tube because back then, again, that was even before drop shot was really a thing, right?
it was
You
the
went to
two.
Erie, you fished tubes. Is
It
what
was
you
on Erie. Is where you caught that one.
yeah.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah,
Wow.
and yeah, those are my two largest. So not, I mean, the smallmouth would be almost kind of world class, but the
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, certainly big, but the largemouth is unnotable.
Sure. Sure.
So
That's well, that's still that's awesome. And I'm gosh, I'm excited too. I mean, the northeast part of the country is incredible. I'm not going to make it up there this year. I'm actually moving in July here to Idaho, so that's taken up most of my summer. But I'm excited from that perspective, just because I'll be close to some really big smallmouth fisheries up there that are a little less well known, but getting more well known. So putting it to the test.
yeah, Brandon was telling me about that, how what those smallmouth feed on up there and why those bass get so big.
It is
Right?
ridiculous.
It's different than our smallmouth here. The same species, but what drives that ecosystem is different, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's just such a like I don't think you'll ever match the Great Lakes from a numbers of giant fish perspective or numbers of like 4 to 6 pounders, right? There's just a stupid amount of them out there.
Yeah,
But it is super interesting to see these places out west that are not nearly as well known, don't have the numbers. They still have plenty, like smallmouth are aggressive, right? So you still catch a lot of fish, but there's not that like base 4 to 6 pound class. But there are some absolute freaks.
yeah,
I mean, last year on Coeur d'Alene, which is a similar layout where those fish are eating kokanee salmon. They're eating all these different things, right? But they I caught a 15-inch fish. I mean, 15 inches, put it
yeah,
on tape, 15 inches, and it weighed 3.45 pounds as a 15-inch smallmouth. I mean, it was just like a bluegill, like
yeah,
it was incredible.
yeah, yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Well, good for you. I mean, that's great. You're in Colorado now, right? You said.
Yep, yep. I'm in Colorado, and I fish east and I fish west in the Toyota series, and kind of go everywhere. But I really enjoy the west, and I'm going to continue with that here for a little bit. And that's kind of my thought process with it all. I'll still travel back east for championships, that kind of a thing. But
Yeah, good for you. Have a great
yeah,
move.
yeah. Well, thanks. Well, awesome. Well, Jim, I don't want to take up any more of your time. This has been an awesome conversation. Thanks
Yeah,
for sharing all your insights and everything with Xzone and the Rod Glove, just two iconic brands in our industry, and it's cool to hear the guy behind it all.
yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. Glad we could finally make it work, and thank you very much.
Absolutely. All righty. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, you too, Adam. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.